Okay, thank you for joining us today. We're going to start our time off with the purest form of art. Okay, what I mean by that is it's art that is not chasing after money, it's not chasing after prestige. It's super humble because most of the time it's anonymous, and that is called graffiti, right? And it's weird because we see that as delinquent stuff, but a lot of times these graffiti pieces are pretty funny. So someone took beautiful flowers going on a wall and made it turn into puke. I'm like, that's pretty genius. They took a bathroom sign and turned it into X-Men. Even though I don't know if that's appropriate or not, what he did with Xavier. This is genius. I saw it a few years ago, but push button, receive bacon. It's a air hand dryer. And then this last one, kind of morbid, but place sacrifice here on a baby diaper changer. And sometimes these graffitis have really deep meanings. So the world is going down into the drains. I'm like, oh man, that's deep, right? Or this one, I don't believe in global warming as the water levels are raising. And it's a deep meaning, and this can be life-changing. People can look at this and think that it's life-changing. Today, we're going to talk about a time where God did graffiti. And it's not like he's like Bart Simpson, sneaking around and drawing. No, he's just out there writing on a wall. And I think his message is the most life-changing that we can get. So let's just get right into it. So we're continuing our series in Daniel. For those who weren't here last week, we were in Daniel 4, I think, right? Okay, Daniel 4. And it was talking about the pride of King Nebuchadnezzar, right? And he was a king who lasted a really long time, and he was just so full of himself. He's like, I'm great, I have all these things, it's all me, I'm pretty much God. And what God did was no, you're not. And he gave King Nebuchadnezzar the brain of pretty much an animal. So he was an animal pretty much for years, until he acknowledged the fact that God is a true God that gave him everything. Everything he has, everything he was, is thanks to God. And once he realized that, he was restored, and he declared to all of Babylon, this pagan country or city, that God is the one true God. Today, our story is about a king who does the opposite. King Belshazzar. He's a regent king who rules in a few reigns after King Nebuchadnezzar. And here's some context, right, in our story. So recently, his army has just been destroyed, right, by another country, not too far away, and he's coming up next. And in his fear and in his stress, what does he do? He actually throws a party. Okay, that's cool. That makes sense. No, it doesn't really, right? But he throws a party for 1,000 of his top officials and his wives and his concubines, and he takes the ceremonial cups of Israel that Nebuchadnezzar ransacked years ago, and uses it to party, to drink wine from. And this is, in a sense, a way to mock God, saying that, hey, I'm greater than the God of Israel. And this is where things get interesting. In the middle of the party, a hand pops out of nowhere and writes on the wall. And King Belshazzar is so scared, he's crapping his pants, because no one associates a dismembered hand with good news, right? So he's stressed, and he calls out his enchanters, his diviners, his astrologers, all the smart people in the kingdom to figure out, hey, what does this mean? And no one could do it. But you guys know who can do it, right? A queen, probably an older queen from the time of Nebuchadnezzar, came up and said, hey, there's this guy in the kingdom, his name is Daniel, and he has a gift for interpreting things. So Belshazzar calls Daniel up, and Daniel tells him what's up. And he starts with this long thing about, hey, your king before you, he was prideful, he thought he was great, better than God, and then what God did was say, hey, you're not, and then he realized that he wasn't, and then all of Babylon praised God. Now, you didn't do this. So this is where our passage actually starts. So join me, Daniel 5, 22 to 28. But you, Belshazzar, his son, have not humbled yourself. Though you knew all this, so all this is the testimony of King Nebuchadnezzar. Instead, you have set yourself up against the Lord of heaven. You had the goblets from his temple brought to you, and you and your nobles, your wives, and your concubines drank wine from them. You praised the gods of silver and gold, of bronze, iron, wood, and stone, which cannot see or hear or understand, but you did not honor the God who holds in his hand your life and all your ways. Therefore, he sent the hand that wrote the inscription. This is the inscription that was written. Mene, mene, tekel, parsin. Here is what the words mean. Mene, God has numbered the days of your reign and brought it to an end. Tekel, you have been weighed on scales and found wanting. Paris, which is the singular form of parsin, your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. Today our question is this. What does the writing on the wall mean for us today? Right? And paying attention to this graffiti, right, and applying what it says, it can make the difference between a great life and a wasted life, between being happily fulfilled versus being regretful. And our answer to the question is this. It means that we must live as if our days are numbered, weighed, and divided. Let's just go into our first point. Our days are numbered. We get this from verse 26, where God is telling Belshazzar that his days, his reign is through. He's done. Now, we see Belshazzar. He's facing doom as another kingdom's invading. And what does he do? He throws a party. And this seems so strange. This is so weird to us. But this is actually common human reaction. When we face hard truths, we live in denial. There was a time when I was in grade 11, 12, and I was kind of struggling with the idea, like, is there a God, right? So with that idea, I'm like, okay, if there is no God, then my life is random. Everything is kind of just happened by chance. I'm an accident. Really, there's no meaning to life, right? It's over. And then from that doom idea, what did I do with that? I'm like, you know what? I should just party it up. I should just have fun, right? And I imagine that's what he's feeling. When you kind of number your days like that, you kind of live senselessly. So who here considers themselves a procrastinator? Yeah, I definitely am. So more hands from you guys. Okay, cool. I think procrastination's... Oh, sorry, I totally forgot about this. This is how many weeks you have left, represented by dots, if you're 25. What? Only that? Yeah, it's mind-blowing, right? We never really look at how much time we have, and this is based off of, like, the average of people dying at 75. And I'm like, oh, man, I can pretty much count that. And, like, a week goes by really fast. It feels like yesterday that I was just at winter camp. That was a week ago, so that was one of the dots. And it kind of puts things into perspective when you look at life this way, right? But this is the reality of it. Our days are numbered, and we like denying that fact. So back to procrastination, right? So we like to procrastinate. And I think that's how we kind of view life sometimes as well. So let's say there's an assignment due in a week, and I'm the procrastinator. What do I do with the whole week? Well, today I say, there's tomorrow. I should just do whatever now, like take a nap or whatever makes it happy. And then the future me, tomorrow's me, can deal with it. Tomorrow comes, and I say that about Tuesday, and then Wednesday, and Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and bam, all of a sudden, my assignment's due in a few hours. And there's always that oh crap moment. Who has had the oh crap moment? Yeah, I had that like this morning when I was doing this. No. Oh crap. I'm done for, right? There's no sleeping, so much stress, terrible day tomorrow, bad marks, and it all builds up, and I just know that I'm done for. And we do that, I think people do that with their lives, right? We're a pretty young church. Shout out to all the birthdays coming up. 35? Okay. And I know it seems like we're going to be here forever. Nothing's going to change. This is going to be LCC for the rest of our lives. But the reality is, our days are numbered. And I think the most tragic thing for us to do is to procrastinate the rest of our lives away. And to have our whole life just amount to this big, oh crap moment where I'm done for. Oh, sorry. I have a prof at Ambrose. And he does this super weird thing where he studied his family tree, and he looked at the statistics of mortality rates in Canada. He did all these factors, and he put it together to figure out when his realistic date of death was going to be. And what he did with that is he came up with a countdown timer, and he put it up there, and he just is always looking at that timer until when he dies. And I'm like, when I heard that, I'm like, dude, that's like the most depressing thing I've ever heard. Who does that? But now when I look at it again, I realize that it isn't. He's not looking at that thinking, oh no, like I'm gonna die soon. No, he's looking at that to see how valuable time is. Right? He's looking at that to see how he can spend that time the best way possible. So as we keep an eye on the number of our days, we become more productive instead of procrastinating, right? Procrastinate productive, sorry. And with that also comes numbering your opportunities. Here's what I mean by that. Last week, as you've heard, a lot of us went to winter camp. And here's my usual mindset towards any camp as a leader, and I'm sure a lot of these leaders feel it too. Okay, cool, I have to pay camp fees. I have to drive hours and hours, pretty much alone because everyone's sleeping in the car. And then when I get there, I have to babysit for the whole weekend. I can't sleep because I have to stay up making sure like these teens don't do any like hanky-panky stuff. And then when I do get to sleep, it's on these like dirty bunk beds that a bunch of smelly teens have used. And dude, this last week, I was like in my sleeping bag and I fell out, and it's like one of those plastic tarp mats, right? I had to peel it off my skin. And I'm like, dude, this is so gross. And it's like, God, please get me out of here ASAP. But for this winter camp, I felt convicted. I felt convicted by God to go in with a different attitude. So I spent the week before just reflecting, right, on the fact that this is an opportunity. This is a privilege, right? Camp is this magical place that gives you times 5 EXP. And for gamers, you probably know what that means, but if you're not a gamer, I'll explain it to you. If you have a normal 10-minute conversation at church, that levels you up, let's say, 1 level. At camp, that same 10 minutes levels you up 5 levels, right? It's so much more like magical. It's more productive. It's this special period. And I just kept thinking about how huge of a privilege it was to be a part of these teens' lives. Like, who am I that the God of the universe would use me to influence others, right? I'm pretty much like this lazy, like, scumbag. And I'm like, wow, God, you love me enough to let me be a part of your work of grace? And going in with that mindset actually changed everything, right? You heard Nate, I don't know how to dance, but there I was like trying to dance. And it was like, and counting my days and counting my opportunities changed everything because I have never enjoyed camp that much before. And I felt God using me in ways that I cannot force myself to be used. And my life was changed because I was open to receive. And I think that's our application for the first point. Number your days, count your opportunities, and with that in mind, make goals and plans that intentionally moves your life forward into a godly direction. Just don't drift along meaninglessly, right? Don't procrastinate your life away. Our second point is that our days are weighed and found wanting. We find this in verse 27, Tekel, where God is saying, like, hey, Belshazzar, like, you're guilty, right? Belshazzar, being so high up his whole life, probably lived his whole life as a judge for himself, right? And a judge for others. That means that he did whatever he wants. He was pretty much God himself. So God straight up told him, no, I'm the true judge, and I'm the true God. And as I judge you, you are found wanting. Belshazzar is guilty. And if you're questioning, why was God being so harsh to Belshazzar? Well, it's because he had the testimony of King Nebuchadnezzar, who had an experience with God and shared it with the whole kingdom of Babylon, and yet Belshazzar ignored that. And it's like someone gave him the answers to a huge test, and he failed the whole thing. We too, like Belshazzar, are weighed and found wanting, and more or less, it looks something like this video that we're going to watch next.
Skylar, did you take the pan of croissants off the counter? No. Did you? Riley, did you do that?
Are you allowed to color on the wall? No, you're not.
How come it smells like poop?
Winnie.
Did you poop your pants?
No, Winnie.
Winnie pooped your pants?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Winston. You pooped your pants?
What's in the suitcase?
I won't tell you.
Why?
I will tell Dad.
Why are you worried about telling Dad? Oh, Lila. Why did you put the cat in there?
You're telling me you haven't ate any candy today?
Mm-mm. I haven't.
You can have one more time to tell me the truth.
Really, I haven't.
Then what is all over your face?
Oh.
You promised you didn't eat any cake.
No.
Are you sure?
No.
Show me your hands.
No, Dada. They are.
Why do you have cake on your hands if you didn't eat cake?
What are you doing? What are you doing? Excuse me.
Let me see. What was in the toilet?
This.
Who did that?
Your first plumbing job?
Who did that? Who put that in the toilet?
I don't know.
Like these kids, we're weighed, right? We're caught red-handed, and we're guilty. But the good news of Jesus and his life, death, resurrection, and church is that as we accept him as Lord and Savior, our guilt and shame are washed away. But it doesn't mean that we can do whatever we want, right? I don't think that is Jesus being your true Savior. No, we're still accountable for our actions. Now, what many Christians do is they think to follow Jesus is to just follow a list of a bunch of do's and don'ts, and that's good enough. But we're actually judged on so much more. Matthew 23:23. Jesus is rebuking teachers of the law and Pharisees, who are people who have lived this life out of do's and don'ts perfectly. Right? And yet, this is what he says to them. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites. You give 1/10 of your spices, mint, dill, cumin, but you have neglected the more important matters of the law, justice, mercy, and faithfulness. You should have practiced the latter without neglecting the former. Justice, mercy, and faithfulness, the more important matters of the law. This is how we will be judged. Not on church attendance, I know a lot of us joke about that, or how many times we drop the F-bomb, or Bible reading plan streaks. No, to live in a way that follows justice, mercy, and faithfulness means that we're actually giving our whole lives away. Right? It's not about being a nice person. It's about living a life that's fully committed to Jesus and fully engulfed in love. I think for this point, it's worthwhile to take a step back and to see if we're following justice, mercy, faithfulness, love, hope, or are we just following a list of rules and calling ourselves Christians? Our third point is that our days are divided. In verse 28, God told Belshazzar that his kingdom was going to be divided and given over to the Medes and the Persians. And out of all three things, this is probably the worst one for Belshazzar, because everything he and previous kings have worked for, all their greatness, everything that made them who they are, they were going to be gone, given to someone else. He would have no legacy, nothing left behind except an oh crap moment. A month ago, one of our members was giving a workshop on investments, and that blew our mind. It was life-changing. I think Eli went and paid his student loans right away after that. But the bulk of us were just sitting there in awe because we're like, whoa, you can save and make so much money by just investing. So let's say, for example, you're 30, and you want to invest until you retire. So if you threw in $100 into stocks every month for 37 years, you would have, at the end, you would have thrown about $50,000 in, but you would have made $200,000. So you would have gotten back $250,000. That's 5 times more than you put in. That's mind-blowing, right? That's one of those things where it's like, take my money, right? That's a good return for investments. But imagine instead of that, someone comes up to you and they're like, no, don't do that. Invest with me. Give me $100 every month for 37 years, and at the end of it, I'll give you nothing. Well, you would be an idiot to take up that offer, right? You would call people a fool, but when it comes to legacy, don't we kind of do that? Don't we kind of invest in like, hey, I want this nice house so people think highly of me, or I want this nice car, or I want this really cool group of friends that actually don't like me, right? We're obsessed these days with making a name for ourselves, and we invest our whole lives into something we hope would make us great at the end, but in reality, it leads to nothing. When we make it all about ourselves, legacies don't last very long. So how do we build a legacy that doesn't end with nothing? From my observations, legacies that actually matter and seem to last are the ones that come from people who give themselves away, who aren't so obsessed with themselves. And I'm going to argue that those who don't chase after their own greatness, but instead after the greatness of others and God, are the ones who leave everlasting legacies. And I'm honestly thinking of Lois right now, right? Like, she just poured into people and loved people, and look at the legacy she's left. Like, Nguyen and Jay have been so foundational to LCC and to so many lives, and imagine that times like her whole community. That's beautiful. That's a legacy that's worth living for. Even at LCC, right? We're doing well these days, and when I think of people who had a part in laying the foundation and leaving legacies that we can work off of, I think a lot of you are here, but one name that comes to mind particularly is a former pastor named Ducky. Right? So when people talk about Ducky, they don't say he's this guy who's all about himself and selfish and cocky and he brags or anything. No, I never heard that about Ducky. They say the opposite, right? He's this guy who just gives. He pours into people. He empowers leaders. Many of the leaders in our church have the privilege to be led by Ducky, and its legacy left behind through his love and sacrifice. That is what made LCC what it is today. And that is very much like Jesus. Philippians 2, he talks about Jesus' humility, how he chased after love and not his own greatness, and through that, he has the greatest legacy ever. A lasting legacy is one that continues to build. Not just something to reminisce about, but something that is continually life-giving. And the reality behind legacies is that it's always going to be divided. You can't really keep it forever, right? I don't think like Napoleon is in his grave being really happy about like what he did about when he was a general, or Albert Einstein being like, yes, like I was a genius, and people still think that. It doesn't last. It's going to be divided. But even so, leave behind a legacy that multiplies, so that even when it's divided between others, it's still life-giving and glorifying to God. For example, Ducky's legacy, in a sense, is divided, right? And now Zoe uses the foundations that he has built and his legacy to continue life-giving work. And Kids Club does the same thing, and other ministries in LCC does the same thing. And that means that this lasting legacy is not all about your name and your greatness, but it's a legacy that sacrifices, loves, and empowers. Where could you sacrifice your time and efforts in order to leave a lasting legacy? And it can be in a person, a ministry, an institution, and I promise you that that kind of legacy is so much more rewarding now and in heaven in the long run than having people praise your name in the here and the now. I'm going to conclude by recapping because Enoch makes me. So as a recap, we must live as if our days are numbered. Wade and divided. So numbered means that we don't procrastinate our lives away. We make good plans in order to tell our time what to do. Weighed means don't just follow a mindless list of do's and don'ts. We live under the rule of justice, mercy, and faithfulness, which requires full commitment to Jesus. Divided means that we chase after a legacy that lasts and that is continually life-giving even after it's divided. This is done through love, sacrifice, and not chasing after your own greatness.